Hello everyone and welcome to Raw for More. I am Marilise the creator of Raw for More. So this is the Raw for More podcast, and usually I invite guests and I interview guests on my podcast. This is going to be a little bit different. Today I am being interviewed as the expert because I'm going to go on a journey with the beautiful Andrea, who will shortly introduce herself. But we have been journeying for the last few months. And we are going to share with you a little bit more about my new book, MOAR, which will be released at the end of Feb.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Fraser and I am a master's candidate at Stellenbosch University. I'm also one of Marilise's team members that's helping her spread this message of MOAR across all social media platforms. And I specialize in TikTok and Instagram. If you want to find out more about MOAR, log on to Instagram and TikTok, and maybe spend most of your time there. Today is actually special. This is our very first conversation. And I think people that are listening and the viewers out there would like to know in more depth what this message means to you personally, and for those professionals who are trying to seek out something a little bit more in life, And I think we're just going to unpack it slowly. We're going to take the time. It's just a chat, a great conversation. So if you're ready, sit down, drink your coffee, and let's begin.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Out there. How about you tell us a little bit more about who Marilise is and what Marilise is?
Well, that is a big question, and really, I am first and foremost a wife and a mother. So I'm married to Heini Basson, and we have two beautiful teenage sons. And then I'm very, very passionate about inviting people into possibility, into their more, and also to find their voice. For me, it's all about speaking our truth. And I'm so passionate about helping people find their voice. And so RAW initially came from a very personal experience where I worked in corporate for 20 years and then suddenly faced burnouts in a situation which was quite toxic. So I was working with a very toxic colleague and then realized that, I was slowly but surely losing myself, losing my voice. And so was really determined after that experience, after I stepped away and writing my first book, Roar, was very determined, to help people really find their voice, speak their truth, speak up. And, I can just maybe share, I've got my first book here, Roar. It was published in December 2019, so that was a couple of years after I left that corporate environment, started my own company, Roar. And the idea was never to write another book. Well, at the time I didn't think I was ever going to write another book. And then at the end of 2021, I was working with a coach who then sort of said to me, Marilise, there's this kind of thing that's coming through. It's roar, it's more, and it's soar. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that sort of planted a little seed, I guess. And then I realized, the sort of more journey then started very much in 2022 when we made a very pivotal decision to come back to South Africa. So that's after 18 years in the UK. And that was a really, really key decision for us, and not necessarily a decision that made sense. If you think about it with your head, it didn't make a lot of sense in terms of, what are we coming back to with the country, some of the struggles we faced in South Africa. And so really more was born from myself, giving myself permission to start making more decisions from my heart. So not so much in my head anymore, but more in my heart, really asking myself, what is my more? What would I love? And what is the life that I would love to create and love to live? And so MOAR was pretty much born, I would say, back in April 2023. We were sort of in the process of moving back to South Africa. And really that was where I started my own journey. And I always say your message is for you first, right? So you have to live the message before you can share the message. Yeah. And so MOAR, this is the manuscript, the finalized manuscript is currently being typeset by Greg Davies and his team. It will be published by the end of Feb. But really, very, very proud of the new book and really my journey the last 5 years into my MOAR, into my dream life that I'm creating.
So, you've achieved this dream life, but you were still playing by the old playbook. What changed, and when was the moment you realized something had changed?
So that was a bitterly tough moment for me because fast forward December 2023, we had just moved into the dream house where we now sat, which we built from scratch on this beautiful piece of land here in Jamestown in South Africa in the Cape Winelands. And I just found myself absolutely exhausted again. Oh, hello Stella. That's okay. She can say hello. Hello people. This is my Stella. Stella. She is also pleasant. She wants to be part of the conversation. She's wonderful. Also the dog that saved me when I was going through my burnout and through my absolute lows in my life. So yeah, now you've had a chance to meet Stella as well. But yeah, so just back to December 23, moving into this beautiful home and just feeling absolutely shattered. And recognizing, by the way, recognize is the first step of the 4-step ROAR process, and I'll probably go into that a little bit more, but recognizing that I was pretty much finding myself in that place of burnout once again. That same place I was in 2017 when I left that toxic work environment with that toxic person, and I kind of said enough is enough. When I was on my knees, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I had this kind of emptiness inside. And so that feeling was still the same. The difference was, I couldn't blame the bully anymore. Now it was me creating a beautiful life, and now I'm the only constant here. So I had to really sort of hold the mirror up once again, get really honest with myself about, what has got to change here? And I love what you're saying about that old playbook, because that's exactly what it is. I was so used to the hustle. I was so used to pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's got to be hard. And so suddenly I realized I've got to find a new way. Yeah. So in 2024, I really started this sort of journey of discovery into a new way. And that was when I sort of became very intentional about it's got to be easy. It's got to feel good. And in order to do that, I realized that I have to be present in the moments. I have to really get some sort of peace in my heart. So it's the whole calming of the central nervous system. And then I've got to stand in my power. So these 3 words became my mantra: present, peaceful, and powerful. So it's very central in the new book that I talk about this new way, this new playbook. And that became a lifestyle, and old habits die hard, right? So we always have this kind of like, the old habits want to come back, and I still today have this tendency of really pushing myself really hard. And then there's always the opportunity to remember that, it can be fun, it can be easy, it can be fulfilling. And that's how I've started showing up differently.
Oh. And for those who are tuning in for the first time and just hearing about ROAR and now you hear about MOAR, how would you differentiate the two? Yes. How would you tell them what ROAR is for? Yes. And that's the purpose of that book, and what MOAR is for.
Amazing. I love that question because it emerged for me as well whilst I was writing the book, because I kind of put ROAR here and put MOAR there. And then I realized that MOAR is just a continuation of ROAR. And so the ROAR blueprint, which is what I've created with the first book, and so the ROAR blueprint is really a way to live your best life every day. On purpose, so standing, on purpose, in your power, and with the courage to speak your truth, the courage to roar. And so that blueprint, I really took into MOAR, because roar for more is that when you're invited into your MOAR, when you go on this hero's journey, and that's kind of the beautiful part about MOAR is it takes you on this hero's journey, and we can dive a little bit into that in a moment, but it takes you on this hero's journey to really making work magic inside and out. And so we think about work in a sort of a formal corporate context, but I mean work in terms of anything that you do that's worthwhile, anything that you do every day that, even going to the gym sometimes feels like hard work, but it's how you show up and it's how you actually progress and go into that sort of more life, that whatever that is for you. I mean, that's the key, right? It's what is it for you? So ROAR is very much part of MOAR. It's still the foundational framework. And then what we do with MOAR is we overlay the hero's journey. And so we take you on this beautiful adventure, this daring adventure, into your MOAR. And ultimately MOAR is about, owning your message and sharing your message with the world.
And in terms of what made you choose the hero's journey as a framework for the foundation of the book?
I think that came to me in a strange way. Like, it wasn't like a very, a definite, I have to use the hero's journey. I've used the hero's journey in my earlier curriculum, in my earlier training programs. And I've always been a big fan of the hero's journey because it's so accessible to everybody. Every movie we watch is based on the hero's journey. The hero is, invited into an adventure, initially may resist it, and then, eventually decide, okay, I'm going to go on this adventure, and then you are faced with struggles and opportunities and, the dragons, you've got to slay the dragons, and then always the hero comes full circle and the story has a beautiful ending. And so for me, it was a really accessible way to say, hey, you are on your own hero's journey. We are all on our own hero's journey. And helping people to recognize that, when you are actually invited into your MOAR, when you go onto that daring adventure, there are inevitably going to be struggles. You are going to be faced with obstacles, and it's how you navigate, how you show up every day, which is then going to help you actually navigate it successfully so that you can get to the end.
I love the progression that you've explained from MOAR to MOAR. I was wondering about the MOAR paradox.
Yes.
And could you just unpack a little bit more for those that are viewing and listening? What does that mean?
Absolutely. So the MOAR paradox, again, that's kind of like emerging from what I actually used to call the power paradox. And so the power paradox, so central to the ROAR blueprint is standing in your power, having the courage to speak your truth, being on purpose, in your power. And so power has always been very central to my curriculum. And so really the power paradox is about, you have infinite potential. There's infinite potentiality. However, what you believe is possible today may not quite be that, match that. So you've got this gap between what you believe is possible and what is actually in fact possible, which is infinite. And so that gap is kind of called the power paradox. Now, if I take the MOAR interpretation of that, the MOAR paradox for me is, okay, so we are meant for more. You know that you are meant for more. And you've also got to believe that you are already more than enough. So the whole paradox is, we know in our hearts we're made for more, but we have that inner bully, we have that inner critic, we have that inner doubt, that inner conversation, which is holding us back. And so we have an opportunity to believe that we are already more than enough today. right here, right now. And I think that for me is what I'm so excited about for this, because more than enough and meant for more, they are basically about elevating. So it's not about a balance, it's about recalibrating up and up and up. So the hero's journey is a journey up and up and up. You're going to go through multiple cycles of this hero's journey. And every time you're going to learn new things, you're going to have new gifts that you can bring to the world. But it's really then about how you give yourself permission to show up, to play big, no more playing small. And I mean, that message is for me first. I was thinking about this just a few days ago, how much, I say in my Raw for More newsletter, no more playing small. And I'm like, oh, that message is for me first, because I've also got to step out. I've also got to show up and speak my message and speak my truth more.
Wow. So I think this is so educational, because when I'm hearing it, it's about choosing both. It's about being more and being enough.
Yes.
So for someone who wants to pick up your book, how do they begin? How do they start this journey of being more?
I'm going to go there in a moment. I just want to quickly pick up on what you said about being more. And I love that, because I've literally just a week ago had a conversation with a coaching client, which was about this. The whole conversation was about, she wants to do this, and she wants to do that, and she wants to do this. And it was all about doing more. Yeah. And there was such a pivotal moment where I was able to invite her into, but what if you're also being more? And so I love that you've presenced that for our listeners, for our viewers, because the being is ultimately what it's all about. Okay? Yes, do a lot, because obviously you've got to do big things. You've got to take bold action and be more of who you were born to be. And so the whole book is an invitation into that discovery of remembering who you were born to be. Okay, and so, I mean, when someone picks up the book, I think what it requires is curiosity, an open mind, a desire and a hunger to learn and to grow, because this work is by no means straightforward. This is by no means easy, right? You have to ask yourself some tough questions. So the main thing is are you actually prepared to do the work? And are you prepared to be patient? There are no quick fixes here. So this book is not going to be your magic wand. It can become your magic wand. Ultimately, it has got, it is about magic, because we bring in the magic. Yes. Because it has to be magical, and then it can be magical, miraculous. I just think the reality is that you'll come into this with an open mind and a desire and a hunger to grow and to learn, and knowing that it's going to get tough. The road's going to get tough. It's not always going to be a straight line. It's like, I always love referring to, if you look at a chart and you look at a share price, it literally does this. But it goes up, and it goes up over time. And that's essentially personal development. We have the same trajectory. Sometimes it feels like you're going backwards, but it's just part and parcel of showing up every day to do the work and to be more of who you were born to be.
Yeah, and I think, in today's climate, we've got this need for instant gratification. We want it now. Yes. We need it now. And I think this topic is just so relevant to young professionals, people that have been working. I was wondering, I know that you're a corporate coach, yes, and during your coaching clients, what are you seeing that are common themes in today's workplace? Mm-hmm. And what is the workplace like in 2026?
So it's not a very nice place to be. I think it's a very, very burnt out space. People are literally running on empty, going through the motions. I see a lot of very, very, very tired people, and people who have put their dreams on hold, who sort of have start their careers with these big dreams and aspirations, and then somehow the corporate grind, happens. And so really, for me, it's evident, when I see people who are living in alignment with their values and their purpose. You know, they have an energy, they show up differently compared to people who are just sort of living paycheck to paycheck. And, you know, there's a lot of information in the book around, you know, the statistics. It's in the multiple billions of lost productivity, you know, just because people are just generally kind of checking out. You know, there's a term called quiet quitting. As is people just quietly quitting, they're just checking out. And I think, unfortunately, I see that a lot. So obviously when people start working with me, the light has gone on, you know, it's kind of, I call the individual an awakening professional. So this is really someone who's kind of been probably me a few years ago, where I had that moment of enough is enough. And I had that moment of there must be more to life than this. You know, for so long I've tried to sort of put myself into this corporate box. For 20 years, in fact, I tried to put myself into a corporate box, and I don't think I was ever supposed to fit into it. And yes, I still work in corporate today, but in a very different capacity, in a different way. And that's what I love about the last 10 years. You know, I've been on my own almost 10 years, and it's that you can really do life on your terms and choose. You always have a choice. And I think that's what I see a lot in corporates today, is people don't feel like they have a choice. They're just like, I have to do this. And so by not choosing, you're also choosing in a way. So for me, it's very much an invitation into, you know, if you have that feeling of, you know, there must be more to life than this, then listen to that whisper. Because I say, you know, the body gives you whispers, but the whispers become screams if you don't listen. In my case, it became a scream, it became burnout. I had to step away from an environment because I just could not anymore. Daily anxiety attacks, really, really unhealthy place to be. And, you know, that's typical burnout. There's lots of symptoms for burnout, but, you know, I would love to invite anybody who is feeling like that sounds like me to really just sort of take a moment out and just get honest with yourself and ask yourself, you know, is this it? Is there more? Can I actually invite myself into that possibility to do something new with my life?
Wow, and talking about burnout, and it's such a common thing now in today's workplace. What are the traditional wellbeing programs not addressing, or what approaches are they just not getting right that you think more about?
Okay, so you're asking me what's wrong with traditional wellbeing programs. I think, first of all, there's a lot of onus on the individual to take responsibility for their well-being. Okay? Leaders not walking the talk. Leaders advocating a well-being program, but then working crazy hours, midnight, weekends, and creating an expectation with the team that that's okay. So really, again, you know, I'm very much about this inside-out transformation. Okay, so traditional well-being programs, fruit bowls, wellness apps, stuff. You know, there's lots of stuff, more stuff for people to do that's already burnt out. Well, guess what's going to happen? Nobody's going to have time to use the wellness app. Nobody's going to have time to eat the piece of fruit or to have a water cooler conversation. So all these gimmicks are useless if you don't create the space for people to actually enjoy them. And so for me, it's about a rhythm, and it's about creating that space, but it's ultimately about the inside-out transformation. So every leader, every professional, we have to start with ourselves. You have to really look inside. And the inside-out piece for me is really aligned very strongly with your values, your purpose. You know, what makes you come alive? What is that thing that you want to jump out of bed in the morning to do? How do you bring that aliveness and that joy back in your day? And that's the invitation. It's really ultimately also about treating energy as a currency. Okay? So energy is your greatest currency. And so how you show up is really about You know, how much energy have you generated in your system to show up full, to show up whole, to show up alive? And so I think for me, the new way going forwards with wellbeing approaches is really to start treating energy as a currency and to really understanding what give our people energy, what deplete their energy, how do we create an environment and create space where people can truly thrive.
Wow, I think that I'm really understanding that. And I'm sure the listeners also starting to understand the way energy is affecting our mental state, our energy, and our ability to do more. Yes. And to feel enough at the exact same time. Yes. For those who are going to pick up this book, what would you like the reader to take away from it? What do you think, or what would you hope for changes within someone who's reading it?
So I would love for someone to almost pick up the book as a guide, as a playbook, and almost to go on a journey. Like, you know, this is your invitation to go on a Euros journey, and it gives you the steps to go on that journey, but to recognize, and again, recognize that it's actually going to take time. You know, this is not going to be that magic wand of you want this today and tomorrow it's going to happen. Yes, it can, but the reality is, you know, you've got to go on that journey and be prepared for it to take a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, you know, depending on that worthy goal, depending on that, you know, big goal. I think, you know, us being back in South Africa in 2026, you know, was probably a 20-year-long dream. You know, it started with a 2-year secondment in England, and life happening and spending 18 years in England, but always with that dream of returning and being home. And for us, you know, that happened, but it happened a long time after, you know, we probably wanted it. We probably wanted it 10 years earlier, but, you know, life happened. So I think it's just what I would love people to do is to use the book as a guide, as a playbook, you know, not expecting it to give them all the answers, but to ask better questions. There's a wealth of questions in this book. And I think for me, it's about asking the questions, taking time to reflect, finding the answers, because at the end of the day, the quality of our lives really do depend on the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves.
Wow, and in terms of when people can get their hands on this book, yes. Tell us more about when we can expect this big launch happen.
So obviously the book will be available end of February, so 26th of Feb this year, we're in 2026. So the date is 26/02/2026, and that is quite intentional. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out because I'm self-publishing this book, so it's not going to be like clear cut in terms of, you know, what's going to be available when. At least I know that the book in its paperback and its e-copy will be available. I'm also working on a little online course to help the readers, you know, obviously digest the book a little bit, to give a little bit more background, some additional resources around the book. So all of that's kind of happening at the moment. But essentially, all you have to remember right now is that on the 26th of February, the book will be available, and you know there is a waiting list. So I will post at the bottom of the notes of this podcast. I will post the link to the waiting list so people can actually join that waiting list. So you will be first to know when the book becomes available, and then of course there will be some special bonuses available if you join the waiting list. So yeah, that's the best way to know when it's out.
And I'm sure many people are looking forward to this launch, and I think it's going to be a great way to just try and find your purpose in 2026 and for future. I think I just want to end off this conversation with a think piece for our listeners out there. If there's someone out there that is feeling that tension between doing more and being more, what advice would you give on how they can address and start a change within in today's time, in this week, in this month? What advice would you have for them?
I took 3 steps actually. You don't have to take all 3 steps today, but I would just kind of share what I did almost 10 years ago now. In that first scenario, when I was in that boardroom and I got demoted by my boss and stepped away into the bathroom, crying my eyes out and looking in the mirror and seeing myself, for the first time in a very, very long time, and saying enough is enough. And first of all, I had to get honest. I really had to get brutally honest about where I was in my current situation, right? So my life was a mess, and I had to get really honest about that. Not easy. What came later, and so maybe the first step is to get honest. What is it you can do right now is to get honest. What came a little bit later was really to get clear, to get more clarity about what it is that I wanted. So kind of getting back into that sort of mode of, actually, you know what, I would love something different for my life. And what was that? And then to really start asking for help and to accepting help. Okay, so those are my sort of 3 steps. And I think if all you do is start with that honesty question, tough, really, really tough. I mean, I'm not making light of this. It took me weeks and months. That honesty it's an evolving thing. What I would add to that is really, just because you asked about being and doing, that tension about being more and doing more. And I love that, because I think for me that is the feeling, right? That is about you becoming really present and recognizing. So first step of the 4-step rule process is always to recognize, to notice, to become aware. Everything starts with that awareness. And to really get yourself to a place where you can begin to feel more, okay? But be more is in a heart space, it's feeling more. Do more is in a head space. And it's that tension. And how can you start aligning that more? How can you start calibrating those 2 things so that you can sort of get that coherence? I love the idea of coherence, that your heart and your head are in alignment and you can start moving forwards. Okay, but this is about experimenting. This is about trial and error. This is not about you're going to try it and you're going to do it the first time. You may try it and you may fail many, many times before you actually can drop into that heart space. By the way, it took me months after I left my corporate job to be able to drop from that head space into that heart space. I was so conditioned to be in my head. After 20 years in corporate, you're in that head space all the time. And so to drop into that heart space more is tough, and it's entirely possible, and it's going to take work. You cannot shy away from the work, the inner work.
Thank you so much.
I love this. This was so amazing. Thank you.
Thank our viewers and you can find Marilise at marilisdevilliers.com and join the waiting list for her MOAR book launch on the 26th of February 2026. Thank you to everyone who's listening, and remember, no more playing small, own your magic, and no message matters.